Out of all the demons, I'm most excited to see Mukurojima in action just because design wise, I think he's the coolest looking and like his silhouette was he's like one of the ones shown from all the way back at the start of the series and what like chapter one, I believe. His silhouette shown in there and then actually showing up and he just looks really cool. And he has ties to Sakaki. But when it comes to the Exorcist, the one that I wanted to see fight the most it was Tsurugi, and we're getting a good display of his powers here, and we actually get names of some of his swords that we didn't see. Specifically, I guess just Excalibur and then Ultra Excalibur. And I want to talk about that specifically in the chapter because one, this was way more of a Tanjinchi chapter, and the structure of each of these fights has been relatively strong opening shonen where the matches are going to clearly like the main character not the main character, the protagonist is going to win because this is from what we've been presented. You have to keep in mind this is the first great demon lords squad out of three, so he's got to be just based off of knowing shonen. Azudaroth is the weakest out of the three. This is his squad, so this is the first one up. So when you're seeing the cross paladins all at play, the fact that they're getting that are relevant to them in any way is obviously going to be good. It is the way that they're going to open into the characters, I think, that is the most important, but also how they exist in the confines of the story. So Mukurojima, we don't know in depth, but we know obviously with Sakaki and Yuta, how that whole backstory is set. And with Kurose, it was more with his brother Sada. And with Tanjinchi, we actually see that he's got verse lore. And I mentioned before that I think just based off of him being more like older traditional Japanese style, I'm guessing that he was like around for the first Black Parade and that he's much older than a lot of the normal demons. And that's why he's so excited to fight Tsurugi. He's fought cross paladins before, as we see in the flashback as the chapter opens. But Tsurugi is the one that he has been excited to fight the most and the strongest one that he's fought so far. And again, that also really tells on Tsurugi because it's it's one of those things where he's the strongest out of the demon lords, and he's doing it more through lore and not just having to do through rank. And we do get stuff in the chapter going to his fighting style. I like that he's a drunk swordsman. I thought that was just really cool how he just is moving all crazy throughout the battlefield as he's drunk and doing these cool spin attacks. But also just in his backstory, like saying how nobody's ever crossed blades with him and lived and told the tale about it. And you get this cool guy with a scythe. I wonder if we're gonna get his name at some point because like even though it was shown that he just died at some point in a fight with Tanjinchi, I would love to get this character just existing in the lore at some point because at some point we're also going to find out which demon killed Hitsugi's mom. I'm guessing it's one of the other great demon lords, but Tanjinchi fighting this cross paladin I would assume is probably not that far back within the timeline. Maybe like a generation or two. Like maybe this was a cross paladin when Sakaki and Tsurugi were pretty young, or maybe like a generation before that. Who knows? But he clearly is able to dominate them and just is able to walk away with the kill. Because I noticed in the previous chapter that he was using his other sword, and he does have two swords, and he does like one of them is named. He brings out in the chapter, which people were talking about online about how the translation, like the naming of it, is translated the same as Enchanted Blade from Kagurabachi, and even one of his techniques is Magatsumi. With I think it was like not properly translated in this chapter, but just like the Japanese text, it's the same way, which is again a nice reference. I like when series that are ongoing make little nods at each other. It's very nice. It's just a good thing to have for people that read the same series in the same magazine. But he ends up getting drunk, and Tanjinchi with his like sick black demon blade rattling bones. The one thing we didn't get in the chapter I was really upset about is he didn't explain anything about like what the sword does. I'm hoping we find out something in the next chapter, and it's not just like it could just be it buffs him like it we did get mentioning from Tsurugi that he did get faster and stronger after he pulled this sword out. But personally, I think that was more for the drunk swordsmanship style and not specifically about the sword. But once he brings out the sword and Tsurugi brings out Excalibur, he goes for like a charge and attack and has one of those moments where he sees his own death and then he stops. And that's when Tonjinshi's like, okay, well, I guess I'll come over at you, and just starts to go on these relenting spin attacks. And that's where we get this bit where he's like mentioning he can't predict where exactly he's going to attack from or what he's going to do, and immediately goes at like all in for Ultra Excalibur. And I didn't think this was going to really do anything specific for him, because one thing that the Ultra abilities have been, because we've had Ultra Pandora, we've had Ultra Leviathan, and we've had now Ultra Excalibur. I think that's the only Ultra moves we've had, because it seems like Ultra just seems to be a buff of something you already have, and it's like, hey, I haven't thought of any new like ult moves, or maybe I just haven't pulled out my current ult move, but this is just a juiced up version of what I already have, because everything we've had so far, like with Kiyoshi, Ultra Pandora obviously maintained the explosion of Titanomaki, but it wasn't like the all-in move that, and afterwards he couldn't fight anymore. He was still doing stuff. But with Hitsugi, that was the second to final attack in his fight, where Jabberwocky was his like current strongest move that he's used in his whole arsenal. So I would assume that we're going to get something in the next chapter for Tsurugi, but as it's shown in this chapter, at the end of it, it's not the same way as like the first bit of Hitsugi versus Kurose, because even after Excalibur, I guess that, specifically now Ultra Excalibur is broken. Well, no, because the pattern goes back to regular Excalibur. So even though Excalibur is broken, he's still going for other sword attacks, and even mentions, just as this cool, he's got a whole model about it, like it doesn't matter how many of his light swords are broken. It's like it comes off of him specifically. We'll talk to his bit in a minute, because I want to go over his character and what we now I would say what we can make out and understand for what we know in the verse and what we know about him and Sakaki, and just the way that what Sakaki says to him in the flashback, what that has to mean. But we have him just go for like these cool light swords as like, yeah, I would imagine just he's just trying to buy time, trying to get this guy gapped in distance and figure out what to do. But Tanjinchi uses this cool like just pairing move where he parries the two light swords and then just does this good quick slash on Tsurugi. I'm curious again, are we going to get an explanation on what the sword is? Because we still haven't figured out what in the previous chapter when he was fighting the other members of Concordia, where he just did the finger tightening. It's like he did draw his sword. If like, did he slash with his fingers? Is he going to explain that ability at some point? But as it were, like he gets a nasty cut on Tsurugi. Tsurugi drops, but at the same time, he's not done yet. He still has these light swords coming back behind and coming down on Tanjinchi, who even after he's like trying to boast on Tsurugi, Tsurugi's getting back up, and he's like, yeah, this is really not crazy of like that you're showing me right now. So as long as my heart's still beating, and as long as my heart's still beating, doesn't matter how many of my swords you break, because a cross paladin like me will never be broken. I think that the idea of that is really cool, because he himself, he's not using one sword. He's not using a specific sword. He's conjuring up all of these light swords, and it's like he doesn't have like anything that he's maining. And because of that, as long as he's fighting, he's just gonna keep throwing blade after blade after blade after blade. And he himself is just more of the arsenal rather than the swordsman himself. Because I like that they, with Tsurugi specifically, I think more so, has this martial arts sword style, which is really cool, because he himself isn't using a specific blade. He is conjuring them through the different hand styles and different like positions and scenarios that he's in. So at the end of the chapter, when he's getting up, he has this whole flashback where Sakaki is saying, don't worry, you're the only one who can replace me. I think this is really important, because he is supposed to be the Hitsugi of his era. Sakaki and Tsurugi are of their generation what Kiyoshi and Hitsugi are of their generation. So Tsurugi, and you can look at like the fact Tsurugi uses two crests, but two of the same crests. Hitsugi uses two crests, but two of the same crests. And I think one of the things we're going to see in the next chapter is going to be that step in what Hitsugi is eventually going to be capable of, because my guess is there's going to be a difference between using two of the same and using two different crests, and maybe that's what Tsurugi is going to display, because he hasn't shown whatever his crazy like trump cards are. I'm guessing that there's something of having two of the same where you maybe fuse them and you could have like some really cool super combined version or something. Because to me, he is a display on where Tsurugi is going to, or sorry, Hitsugi is going to achieve eventually, and he's going to now show a power that Hitsugi doesn't have at the moment, but in the future he's going to be able to achieve. Because I assume from this fight, this was going to be Tsurugi was going to have to pull in everything he had, and maybe he was going to be able to go and fight against Azudaroth at some point, but I didn't think it was going to be a for sure. It was going to be more so like he is going to be able to take this guy out, but he is not going to be like, oh yeah, I'm just fine, I'm going to be perusing over to the next battle, just because it would be too easy for them if they're just all ganging up on Azudaroth. I feel even if most of them are damaged, they could easily get healed and then go back in. We don't know the exact level and frequency of healers and getting people kind of like patched up for battle, especially for like when it comes to the severity after some of these fights. So I think having similar to Kurose versus Hitsugi, this is going to be one of those fights where you know he's going to be able to pull through, but at the end of it, he's going to probably be done for the rest of this arc. Because Sakaki, I think Sakaki is going to be able to go to the Azudaroth fight, but Tsurugi right now, I just don't really see it. He just seems like he's going to be too injured after he pulls through. I'm hoping in the next chapter we're going to see some cool just like explanations on like what this cursed blade does. Is he going to shoot, like I want to see like a cool move from him, specifically like him just do like a cool technique that's named. Maybe he does like one of those cloud cuts where he does a slash and you see above it there's just a big slice in the cloud layer or something like that. Or maybe he does something you see off in the distance, like there's just like telephone poles that are all cut and they're like miles away or something. I don't know, something just neat visually that his sword technique and skill is able to display at his full power. Because Tsurugi, whatever he's going to do next chapter, I assume he's going to pull out some new special set of skills and abilities other than what we've already seen. Because I think other than like sharpshoes, we've seen pretty, and I guess ultra Excalibur, even though it's just buffed Excalibur, we saw almost everything that he's already shown. So I would assume that he's going to really start bringing out his crazier things in the next chapter. I don't know if we're going to get more than one more chapter in this fight. I would assume that we're going to get at least just one more full focused fight. Maybe we'll get one and then it'll be one of those ones where there's a little bit more in the next chapter, or this next chapter is going to be half flashback going into the fight, and then the next chapter after that is going to be the conclusion of the fight going into the next fight. I don't know. Either way, I'm looking forward to a bit of a flashback, because I think it's really interesting that Sakaki was, he was that guy of that generation, but he stepped down. And Tsurugi is clearly very capable, but I wonder what it's like just to kind of have somebody that's like that same scenario where he is the undoubted number one position, but he's just like, nah, man, you can have it. Like, I don't want this. I'm going to do something else. And he just leaves and he's all cool about it. And especially when you're someone like Tsurugi who's very dedicated to the job and serious. But whatever Tsurugi's ult move, I can't wait to see what it is in the next chapter. I just want to see something really badass for both the two of them. I think it'd be sick if you saw two of those, they're just going to do a lightning draw and you don't even see them draw their swords. You just hear the click at the end and you see like two slashes. Like maybe it's something like that where you just see from Tanjinshi's area, you just see this big area of this city that's cut, but with Tsurugi, it ends up being the cloud layer that's like sliced around the side. I don't know. Or maybe he's going to start doing some cool stuff. He's going to be like, I'm going to cut you at light speed. something like that, or he's gonna, I don't know, something cool in ties to his power. Maybe he'll do something like, I'm gonna swing my sword and it's impossible to dodge, or once I swing, I will conjure swords, like, you know, a thousand every second until this technique is done or something, or every single swing. I just want something neat from him, because he's got a pretty cool power like light swords, but we haven't seen anything in particular outside of what we've already been given. But I'm guessing that's going to be more of the next chapter or so, and this chapter was more like set to show off Tanjinchi. So I don't know. Next few chapters are going to be pretty hype. I think it's just going to be really fun to see more of this boss swordsman and fighting Tsurugi, because Tsurugi at the end of this chapter, like I said, did not have a lot, like, he didn't seem nearly as pressed as Jack Joe and Nihon at the end of their first fight of the chapter, and Hitsugi at the first chapter in his fight. The fact that Tsurugi gets up and he's clearly damaged, but he doesn't nearly come off as, you know, I've got to break my limits and think of something new. He seems more of just like, okay, you got me on that last one. Now I'm going to have to actually start busting out one of my couple trump cards. So we'll see. Other than that, comment below. Tell me your thoughts about this chapter, and tell me your thoughts about the next one. This one is cool because it's set up for a character chapter in the next one, but it ended up being more so kind of a character backstory for the bad guy, which I really liked. I thought that was good, because I've mentioned that this series has really good villains that are fun and likable, even if they're only gonna be like on the screen and out there in display for a few chapters. Because like Kurose Sada, I thought he was actually pretty entertaining for a guy who was only in a few chapters and then was exorcised. But other than that, I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye.